Two lives, forged in the crucible of history's harshest trials, braided together by the slender thread of a summer internship, tested in the white-hot glare of a nation's expectations, and tempered in the unrelenting furnace of public scrutiny that would have melted lesser unions into slag. One marriage that the world dissected under microscopes of malice, whispering of cracks wide enough to swallow reputations, of secret affairs that bloomed in the shadows of power, of a divorce that seemed as inevitable as the changing of the guard. Yet somehow, against every odd stacked by tabloids and trolls, emerged not merely intact, but luminous, a living monument to the quiet, brutal, beautiful art of choosing each other again and again when walking away would have been the path of least resistance. But on the eve of her 60th birthday, with the echoes of 8 White House years still reverberating through her bones like the aftershocks of a political earthquake, Michelle Obama finally stepped out from behind the armor of the poised smile, the perfectly tailored sheath dress, the unflappable grace that had become her trademark. She faced the cameras, the podcasts, the endless digital bonfire of speculation, and spoke words so unflinching, so stripped of every layer of varnish and veneer, that they landed like a gavel in a courtroom packed with doubters who had long ago convicted her marriage in the court of public opinion. Asterisk, there were 10 years where I couldn't stand the sight of him. The girls got the best of him. I got the exhaustion, the resentment, the endless to-do lists. But I never, not once, stopped loving the man I chose. Asterisk, tonight, on Tales of the Famous, we walk the cracked sidewalks of Chicago's South Side at twilight, where the streetlights flicker like hesitant promises and the air carries the faint, comforting scent of fried onions drifting from corner kitchens where grandmothers stir pots of greens with the same hands that once picked cotton under a different sun. We trace the bloodlines that snake through the humid haze of low-country plantations, where the sun baked hope into the red clay, and the cicadas sang dirges for dreams deferred, and through the chaotic, spice-laden alleyways of Jakarta, where a wide-eyed boy learned that the world is larger, crueler, and infinitely more wondrous than any map could ever hope to capture. We sit at the scarred Formica table in a Euclid Avenue duplex where the Robinsons played Monopoly until the wee hours, the clatter of plastic houses and hotels punctuating laughter that drowned out the city's sirens, and we stand in the fluorescent hum of Sidley Austin's 32nd floor, where a summer associate with a Hawaiian tan, a dreamer's eyes, and a name that rolled off tongues like exotic music first locked gazes with the sharp-minded mentor assigned to keep him from getting lost in the corporate maze. We will linger in the sterile quiet of fertility clinics where heartbreak lived in the stark white lines of negative pregnancy tests and the soft click of doors closing on hope, and in the dimly lit corners of therapy offices where 2 exhausted souls, still wearing the crowns of power, learned that love is not a perpetual feeling of butterflies. It is a daily act of demolition and reconstruction, of tearing down walls built from resentment and laying new foundations with the mortar of forgiveness. Stay until the final, heart-stopping revelation, the one that turns every salacious rumor into dust, every cynical headline into a footnote, and every skeptic into a quiet believer who finally understands that perfection was never the point. Because this is not merely the story of a first couple photographed 1,000 times against backdrops of flags and rose gardens. It is the autopsy of a myth, the blueprint for endurance in an age of disposability, and the irrefutable proof that even under the Klieg lights of history, love can be the most radical, subversive act of rebellion a person can commit. Imagine a narrow brick house on South Euclid Avenue in the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago, the kind of street where kids chalk hopscotch grids on the sidewalk and the ice cream trucks jingle is the soundtrack of summer. The upper flat belongs to Great-Aunt Robbie, whose piano scales drift down the stairwell like incense from a private chapel, filling the air with the promise that music can lift you above any circumstance. Downstairs, Fraser Robinson, city water plant worker by day, Democratic precinct captain by passion, multiple sclerosis creeping through his limbs like ivy through cracked concrete. Limps to the kitchen table every evening to count the day's small victories. Another shift completed, another voter registered, another smile from his children that makes the pain recede just enough to keep going. Marion Shields Robinson, once a secretary at Spiegel's catalog, now the full-time architect of her children's futures, sets plates of smothered pork chops, candied yams, and collard greens with the precision of a general plotting troop movements, her eyes missing nothing, her love a silent force field around the table. This was Michelle's universe. Monopoly marathons that stretched past midnight, the clatter of plastic hotels, and the triumphant shout of boardwalk, punctuating laughter that drowned out the city's sirens and the distant rumble of the L train. Extended family barbecues where uncles argued Cubs versus White Sox and aunts traded recipes like state secrets, their voices rising and falling in a symphony of shared history. Sunday mornings at South Shore United Methodist Church, with the choir's harmonies wrapped around the congregation like a warm blanket, and the preacher's cadence reminded everyone that grace was not earned but given. Craig, 21 months older, was the golden child who skipped second grade with the ease of a natural. Michelle followed close behind, her report cards a string of A's that were less about bragging rights and more about the unspoken contract with a father whose illness loomed like a permanent storm cloud. Asterisk excel, or break his heart. Don't give him one more thing to carry. Asterisk. But the blood coursing through their veins carried contracts far older than any childhood promise. On Fraser's side, great-great-grandfather Jim Robinson, born into the brutal arithmetic of slavery in 1850 on Friendfield Plantation near Georgetown, South Carolina, walked free at 15 when Union guns finally silenced the overseer's whip and the Emancipation Proclamation rewrote the ledger of human worth. He built a life from the nothing that had been his inheritance, tilling the same red dirt his ancestors had bled into, and his descendants still farm those fields today, their calloused hands a living archive of survival. On Marion's side, great-great-great-grandmother Melvinia Shields, enslaved on a 200-acre farm in Clay County, Georgia, bore a mixed-race son, Dolphus, in the shadow of 1860's gathering storm. DNA evidence and yellowed family Bibles whisper that the father was almost certainly Charles Marion Shields, the planter's 20-year-old son, a secret Melvinia carried to her grave, never uttering the name aloud, yet raising her children within sight of the big house, adopting the Shields surname for a time before shedding it like a skin that no longer fit. Her lines scattered like seeds in the wind. Birmingham, Cleveland, and finally Chicago, each generation carrying resilience the way other families carry silver tea sets or heirloom quilts. And then, as if the past weren't already a heavy enough inheritance, picture a 6-year-old girl with braids and a determined glare boarding a CTA bus at dawn, backpack slung over one shoulder, 3 hours of commuting ahead of her just to reach Whitney M. Young Magnet High School, Chicago's first selective enrollment public school, a beacon for the city's brightest, but a daily gauntlet for a black girl from the South Side. 3 hours there, 3 hours back, past neighborhoods where glances could curdle milk and whispers followed her like exhaust fumes. Classmate Santita Jackson, yes, daughter of that Jackson, sat 2 rows over, but even civil rights royalty couldn't shield Michelle from the casual cruelties. Teachers who asked about Craig's grades, but not hers. Boys who assumed the pretty black girl couldn't possibly be the one solving calculus in her head. She internalized every slight, turned it into rocket fuel that propelled her to the National Honor Society, to advanced placement courses that made her eyes burn at 2 a.m., to the student council treasurer's gavel that she wielded with the same precision she brought to everything else. Second in the class of 1981, and when the diploma was in her hand, she looked the doubters in the eye and said, without words, "Watch me." Princeton, 1981. High school counselors had warned her, asterisk, "You're aiming too high, Michelle. Try a state school." Asterisk, her brother Craig's glowing transcript cracked the door. Michelle's sheer force of will kicked it off the hinges and stormed through. Sociology major, African American studies minor, a thesis that clocked in at 99 blistering pages, mailed to hundreds of black Princeton alumni, with a questionnaire that asked the uncomfortable question, does Ivy League polish sever your roots? The answers came back in a trickle, but they were enough to prove her point. Elite education often built walls where bridges should have been. She ran the Third World Center's daycare, tutored kids after hours until the streetlights came on, rewrote the French curriculum to favor conversation over conjugation because real life didn't care about the subjunctive. First-year isolation hit like a Chicago winter. No parents with college stories to swap at Thanksgiving, a white roommate's mother demanding reassignment because of race, the shock of classmates who summered in places with names like Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard and returned with tans and stories of sailboats. But she graduated cum laude in 1985, carrying the hard-won lesson that belonging is not something you inherit. It is something you build, brick by brick, doubt by doubt. Harvard Law School, 1988. The campus still smelled of old money and older privilege, but Michelle walked the yard like she owned it. Protests for minority faculty hires that shut down Massachusetts Avenue. Nights in the Legal Aid Bureau drafting motions for tenants facing eviction in triple-decker apartments that leaked like sieves. Mentored by Charles Ogletree, who saw the girl from South Shore resolve the war raging inside her. Asterisk, be brilliant. Be black. Be both, unapologetically. Asterisk JD in hand, she strode into the marble lobby of Sidley Austin's Chicago office ready to conquer the corporate world on her own terms, her heels clicking a rhythm that said, I belong here, and you will move. Now shift the frame across oceans and decades to a hospital room in Honolulu where the trade winds carried the scent of plumeria through open windows. August 4th, 1961. Kapiolani Medical Center for Women and Children. In Dunham, 18 years old, Kansas-born anthropologist in training with a restless intellect and a heart big enough to love across continents, gives birth to Barack Hussein Obama Jr., the only U.S. president born outside the contiguous 48 states. His father, Barack Hussein Obama Sr., 27, a Kenyan Luo economist on a scholarship that was the golden ticket out of colonial dirt, already married back in Nyong'o with children he rarely mentioned. They met in a Russian-language class at the University of Hawaii, bonded over Pushkin and politics, married in a quiet ceremony in Wailuku on February 2, 1961, separated before their son's third birthday. Barack Sr. earned a master's at Harvard, returned to Kenya, remarried, rose to a senior economist post in the finance ministry, visited his son exactly once, a Christmas in 1971 that left more questions than answers, and died in a car crash in 1982 when young Barack was 21. The boy, called Barry by his grandparents, shuttled like a human ping-pong ball, a year in Seattle with his mother while she finished her degree, then Jakarta from 1967 to 1971 with stepfather Lolo Sitoro, an Indonesian geographer turned oil company executive whose lessons in resilience were delivered between bouts of teaching a skinny kid how to box in a backyard ring by banana trees. Catholic school for 2 years, public school for 1.5, Indonesian fluency by age 10, the taste of street vendor satay and the sound of Moss calls at dawn embedding themselves in his bones. Honolulu, 1971. Maternal grandparents Madeline and Stanley Dunham, banker and furniture salesman, the original odd couple, enrolled him at Punahou School, an elite private academy where the tuition was a stretch but the education was non-negotiable. His mother pursued her Ph.D. in anthropology, divorcing Lolo in 1980, dying of ovarian and uterine cancer in 1995 after treatments in Hawaii that came too late. Teen Barack wrestled his reflection in the mirror. Alcohol to blur the edges, marijuana to quiet the noise, cocaine once or twice to see if numbness could answer the question asterisk, what are you? Asterisk the Choom Gang, past joints in Volkswagen vans parked at the beach, books past salvation in the library's fluorescent hush. Occidental College for 2 years, Columbia for the BA in Political Science in 1983, Harvard Law in 1988, where he became the first black president of the Harvard Law Review and learned that leadership was less about charisma and more about listening until the room leaned in. Community organizer in Chicago's shuttered steel towns, walking door to door in public housing projects where hope was a luxury no one could afford. And then, as if the universe had been holding its breath for 28 years, the collision. Sidley Austin, summer 1989. Michelle Robinson, 25, associate in marketing and intellectual property, sharp as a scalpel and twice as precise, assigned to mentor the lanky summer associate whose name no one could pronounce on the first try. Lunch in the cafeteria, where the fluorescent lights made everyone look slightly ill. A community organizing meeting in a church basement, where folding chairs scraped against linoleum and the air smelled of coffee and righteous anger. She had told her mother, career first, men later. Their first date. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing at a theater on the north side, emerging into the humid night arguing about whether Mookie was right to throw the trash can. He quoted scripture and sociology in the same breath. She saw the stability her childhood had taught her to crave. He saw the adventure his rootless youth had made him chase. Opposites didn't just attract. They detonated like matter and antimatter, leaving a relationship in the crater. But Barack carried baggage heavier than any carry-on. David Garrow's rising star on Earth's Sheila Miyoshi Yeager, 1980s girlfriend, now an Oberlin anthropology professor. The woman he lived with in a Hyde Park apartment where the radiator clanked like a metronome keeping time for their dreams. He proposed twice. She refused both times, citing youth, family pressure, the sense that his political star was already ascending and she wasn't ready to be the footnote. Breakup in 1987. Sheila to Korea for fieldwork. Barack to Chicago to chase the next chapter. 1990. Sheila returns to Harvard for a postdoc. Barack, now officially dating Michelle, writes letters on Sidley Austin letterhead confessing that the embers hadn't fully died. Sporadic coffee meetups in Cambridge cafes where the leaves turned early and the conversation lingered too long. Whispers of overlap, of emotional infidelity if not physical, took root like kudzu in the fertile soil of political gossip. 1991. Sheila moves on, begins a new relationship. Barack commits fully, finally. October 3rd, 1992, Trinity United Church of Christ on 95th Street. The same sanctuary where Jeremiah writes sermons would later ignite national firestorms. Vows exchanged under stained glass that filtered the afternoon light into rainbows across their faces. A miscarriage that carved a hollow space where joy should have been. IVF clinics with fluorescent lights and paper gowns, the soft click of doors closing on hope, the eventual miracles. Malia, and born on the 4th of July 1998 like a firework of possibility. Natasha, Sasha, June 10th, 2001, completing the family with a giggle that could disarm Secret Service agents. Barack's star kept rising. Illinois State Senate in 1996, where he learned to broker deals across aisles that seemed unbridgeable. U.S. Senate in 2004 after a Democratic National Convention keynote that stopped hearts across the country and launched 1,000 Obama for president buttons. Michelle juggled with the grace of a circus performer on a high wire. Assistant to Mayor Richard Daley, Deputy Commissioner for Planning, Executive Director of Public Allies, where she shattered fundraising records that stood for 12 years. Associate Dean at the University of Chicago, where she built a community service center from scratch. Vice President at the University of Chicago Medical Center, where her salary hit $273,600 in 2006, and the family's total income crested $991,296 thanks to book royalties and a board seat at Treehouse Foods. The 2008 campaign was a blur of town halls and tarmacs, but Michelle drew a line in the sand. 2 days a week on the trail, home by the second night. No exceptions. The girls came first. Valerie Jarrett, Michelle's mentor from the mayor's office, became the Obama campaign's secret weapon. The family stayed rooted in Chicago even after the election, believing that Hyde Park's tree-lined streets were better for raising grounded children than any gated compound in D.C. January 20th, 2009. The South Lawn. Michelle in that lemongrass Jason Wu gown that would launch 1,000 knockoffs. She redefined the role before the ink was dry on the oath. Let's move. School gardens sprouting in concrete jungles, healthier cafeteria lunches that actually tasted good, playgrounds built where asphalt had ruled. Joining forces with Jill Biden. Yellow ribbons, care packages, college funds for military kids. Reach higher. college fairs and high schools where guidance counselors had long ago given up. Let girls learn. Classrooms in Malawi and Morocco, where girls who once carried water now carried textbooks. State dinners with Yo-Yo Ma's cello weeping through the East Room. Beyoncé singing the national anthem until the chandeliers trembled. Marion Robinson moved into the third-floor residence. Grandma Anchor, dispenser of wisdom and warm cookies. But the rumors never slept. Tabloids screamed affairs with everyone from Secret Service agents to foreign dignitaries. Bloggers dissected every sideways glance. Therapy became a whispered punchline. Michelle, in Becoming and On the Light We Carry tour, laid it bare. Asterisk, there were 10 years where resentment was my constant companion. The girls got the best of him. The bedtime stories, the basketball games. I got the stress, the endless to-do lists, the nights alone in the residence while he was in the situation room. We went to counseling. We learned that marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100 out of 100 on the days you only have 10 to give. Asterisk Barack, in The Audacity of Hope, admitted their schedules had starved romance until date nights became emergency oxygen masks pulled down in a depressurized cabin. 2024, Michelle, 60, on Revolt TV with Angela Rye, no teleprompter, no filter. Asterisk, I resented the sacrifices. The girls' school plays I missed because of state dinner. The birthdays that happened while I was on a plane. But divorce? Never an option. We chose each other every single day. Some days through clenched teeth, some days with tears, but always a choice. Asterisk, no confirmed affairs. No separation papers. Just two mortals who learned that love is less a fairy tale and more a construction site. Hard hats required, blueprints revised daily, occasional explosions that clear the way for stronger beams. From the stoops of South Shore to the South Lawn Rose Garden. From the fluorescent hum of fertility clinics to the hush of the situation room, where history pivoted on a single decision. They modeled the radical ordinary. Love is persistence disguised as grace, forgiveness disguised as strength, and commitment disguised as the quiet revolution of showing up when no one is watching. So tell me in the comments, do the Obamas prove that therapy is the new romance novel? Or that every great love story is just a series of quiet apologies, rebuilt trust, and the courage to choose the harder path when the easier one is lit by flashbulbs? Like if you believe real love looks more like Monday morning therapy sessions than Friday night roses under a full moon. Share with the partner who needs to hear that choosing each other, especially on the days when resentment feels like a third roommate, is the ultimate power move in a world that celebrates walking away. Subscribe and hit the bell for more marriages that survived the spotlight, the rumors, the relentless grind of history, and came out shining like diamonds forged in pressure that would have pulverized coal. This is Tales of the Famous. The vows were spoken in a church on 95th Street under stained glass that turned sunlight into rainbows. The legacy echoes in every couple that refuses to quit, every partnership that chooses reconstruction over ruin. Every love story that proves the most powerful revolution is the one that happens in the quiet spaces between headlines.